Have you ever wondered if a single letter could change the destiny of an entire continent? A letter delivered in secret, with a proposition that most people would find impossible to refuse. Billions of dollars. A colossal sum of money that could transform a nation from poverty to prosperity overnight. But the story we're about to tell you today isn't about the power of money. It's about the power of a single word. No. Our story begins in a small West African nation, Burkina Faso, and our protagonist is a young soldier named Ibrahim Traoré. He isn't a seasoned politician, but a man who swore an oath to protect his country from foreign interference and exploitation. One day, that envelope arrived. Inside was an astonishing offer from the Israeli government, not to help, but to bribe him, to buy his silence on the world stage and protect their business empire across Africa. It was a fateful moment, a choice that could bring personal fame and fortune, or a path of principle and courage. And he chose the latter. He chose not to stay silent. He took that microphone and spoke the truth to the entire world. That brave act didn't just change his own life. It lit a fire of hope and dignity for 1.4 billion people across Africa. So what happened next? And why was a simple no so terrifying to the world's most powerful nations? This is the story of an Africa that is rising, an Africa that is not for sale. I want to tell you a story that you might find hard to believe. It's not a Hollywood action movie, but it has all the drama, impossible choices, and a historic turning point. Our story takes place in a small West African nation, Burkina Faso. Our protagonist is Ibrahim Traoré, a young and passionate soldier. He didn't come to power as a seasoned politician, but with a simple and powerful promise: to protect his country from all foreign interference. That promise was soon put to the test. One day, a letter arrived. It wasn't ordinary diplomatic correspondence, but a colossal temptation, carefully disguised. Inside was an offer of $1.2 billion from Israel. Just try to imagine that. That number was even larger than Burkina Faso's entire national budget. It was a sum of money that could build hundreds of schools, hospitals, and change the lives of millions of people. But this offer was not aid. It came with bitter conditions. Traoré had to stop criticizing Israel. He had to become their spokesperson in the African Union. And most importantly, he had to protect their business empire on the continent. It was an invitation to become a foreign puppet, to sell the dignity of an entire people. You might be asking yourself, if it were me, what would I do? Would you have the courage to refuse a sum of money that could solve all of your personal and national problems? Or would you accept it, telling yourself you were doing what's best for the country? This isn't just Traoré's story. It's the story of a changed leadership philosophy. So why were these world powers so confident in making such an offer? Had they become too accustomed to the old, corruptible Africa? Maybe they were wrong. Let's dive deeper into the next part to uncover that monumental miscalculation. You know, for decades, world powers used a very familiar playbook when dealing with Africa. That playbook said, give them aid and they will stay quiet. Offer them lucrative economic deals and they will follow your lead. This was a leftover relic from the colonial era, a mindset deeply ingrained in the psyche of powerful nations. They believed that Africa was a land rich in resources but lacking in resolve, and that its leaders were merely gatekeepers who could be bought. They thought that when faced with a massive sum of money, a young soldier like Traoré would be unable to resist. For example, in years past, many foreign companies would come to Africa and exploit diamonds, gold, oil, and other precious resources. In return, they might build a few roads, a few small schools, and pay a very small sum to the government. The contracts were filled with unfair clauses, but leaders would accept them due to economic pressure, and because they thought it was the only option. So what changed? It was Traoré's generation. They are no longer just gatekeepers. They are educated, they are connected, and they use the internet to communicate with each other and with the world. They have witnessed the mistakes of the past and refuse to repeat them. They understand that these partners are not bringing sustainable development, but rather thinly veiled exploitation. The lesson here is, you cannot use old tricks to deal with a new generation. When you think a nation is a marketplace, One day they will prove to you that they are a sovereign people. And what Traoré did next was the ultimate proof of that. Instead of negotiating in secret, he did something no one had the courage to do. Could you imagine? The entire world was holding its breath, and everyone believed that a secret deal was about to be signed. They had prepared for a lengthy negotiation, a familiar diplomatic charade. But they were wrong. Completely wrong. Instead of sitting at the negotiating table, Traoré did something nobody expected. He organized a press conference, invited international journalists, and read the entire bribe letter out loud on live television. Every single word, every brazen clause. In that moment, there was a deafening silence in the room. The world was stunned. A young African leader had used a microphone to expose the naked truth. This action was like a shot fired at the system. World powers were accustomed to operating in the shadows. Their words carried the weight of authority. But now, those secret words had been made public, stripped bare in the light. The immediate reaction was pure panic. According to diplomatic sources, Tel Aviv went into high alert. Urgent calls were made, and internal meetings were held in a frenzy. They called Traoré the one who turned a private agreement into a weapon. Meanwhile, French officials in Paris rushed to assess the damage to their own relationships with other African nations. Even seasoned journalists who had covered African politics for decades admitted they had never witnessed anything like it. In this information age, the truth is the most powerful weapon. It can neutralize all power, all conspiracies, and all lies. So where did that truth spread? And what kind of wave did it create? Let's find out what happened across Africa after that historic moment. Have you ever seen a single spark land in a dry field? It doesn't burn alone. It quickly spreads, turning into a massive blaze. And Traoré's action was that spark. It landed on a passionate generation of young Africans who had been waiting for a signal, a moment of validation to take action. For the first time, they had a hashtag to express their hearts. Africa not for sale. This hashtag wasn't just words on social media. It was the voice of millions of students, artists, and young entrepreneurs across the continent. From Cairo to Cape Town, they shared videos, created murals, and organized protests. Look at Senegal, for instance, where university students took to the streets, not for a specific policy, but to demand transparency in all diplomatic agreements. Or in Ghana, where street artists painted giant murals to honor Traoré, seeing him as a symbol of national dignity. Even in Kenya, where young people launched online campaigns to question their government's relationships with foreign powers. This generation once believed they couldn't change anything. They thought they had to accept what previous generations had accepted. But Traoré's words proved them wrong. He showed them that. We are not isolated. We are connected. The true strength of a nation doesn't lie in its budget or military, but in the consciousness and unity of its people. But this movement didn't stop at protests and hashtags. It created real economic challenges for Burkina Faso, and how they dealt with that is another astonishing story. When a brave person stands up, they face not only praise, but also pressure and risks. And after Traoré's historic act, Burkina Faso had to face an economic storm. Aid was cut, loans were delayed, and banking transactions became more difficult than ever. Perhaps the world powers thought this was the most effective way to force Traoré into submission. But then, something miraculous happened. That was when the power of the Africa helping Africa model was revealed. Instead of having to plead with the West, Traoré received calls from his neighboring leaders. They didn't just offer encouragement, they proposed practical solutions. Did you know Nigeria proposed new trade agreements, creating an alternative market for Burkina Faso's products? Ghana proactively offered banking alternatives, helping to solve financial problems. South Africa, with its strong economy, also opened new diplomatic channels, creating solid political backing. This unity wasn't just a short-term support measure. It was the foundation for a more self-reliant economic network in the future. This is exactly what Traoré had said in his speech. We stop exporting raw materials and start building factories. We trade with each other first, the world second. That dream was no longer a distant idea, but was gradually becoming a reality built by African nations together. So, upon witnessing such a united and resilient Africa, how did the world powers react? And how did the global rules of the game change? Join me in the next part to find out. When a tidal wave hits, what you once thought was solid will crumble. The truth is, Traoré's action wasn't just a spark, it was a political and economic tidal wave that shook the entire world. The first thing that world powers and major corporations realized was that the old playbook was no longer effective. Companies with large operations in Africa, from mining to agriculture, initially panicked. Their stock prices wavered. They realized that relying on shady deals and hidden exploitation was not a safe strategy. It was full of risk and could collapse at any time. But then, an interesting shift occurred. The smart companies quickly adjusted. They began renegotiating contracts, offering fairer terms, and investing in local communities. They understood that becoming a true partner, rather than an exploiter, would yield more sustainable profits in the long run. On the diplomatic front, world powers also had to change. They could no longer use old tricks to control Africa. They had to accept a new reality. Africa was no longer their backyard. All relationships now had to be built on a foundation of respect, transparency, and equality. When there are no secret deals and corruption, the market becomes more predictable and secure for everyone. So, what does all of this mean for the future of Africa? And what is the biggest lesson we can learn from this story? Join me in the final part to find the answer. Finally, we have reached the end of our story. A young soldier's no was not just a brave act. It became the guiding principle for a revolution. A revolution not of guns, but of dignity and truth. The story of Ibrahim Traoré and Burkina Faso is a lesson for the entire world. The first lesson is about transparency. When the light of truth is turned on, every conspiracy and hidden agenda in the shadows is exposed. The second is about the power of unity. Africa's strength does not come from one individual, but from the solidarity of millions of people and neighboring nations working together to build a self-reliant future. And finally, it is a lesson in national pride. That dignity cannot be bought. That Africa is not a commodity, a market to be exploited, but a sovereign continent with intelligent and ambitious people. When I look at the young generation in Africa today, I see that what Traoré said is slowly becoming a reality. They are starting businesses, building tech companies, establishing factories, and creating art to celebrate their identity. They are not waiting for foreign approval. They are building the future themselves. This is a story about the end of an old era and the beginning of a new one. An era where nations must treat each other as equals. An era where the voice of a small nation can change the entire world. And this is our final message. Africa is not for sale. Our resources are not for plunder. Our leaders are not for purchase. This is Africa's time, and we are just getting started.